Welcome, everybody. My name is Stefania Mato. I'm C40 Head of Food Strategy. And I would like to say in this venue and in this context that before starting to work with C40 in 2016, I was working for the city of Milan and the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact. So it's really kind of emotional for me to be here today after so many years and see how many people is around, how many things are happening. This is just wonderful. And I thank you all for being part of this. First of all, thank you, Milan, for hosting us again. Thank you, MUFPP, but also thank you to Università Statale, this amazing venue where we are, as well as all of the people and the cities who helped us put together this small session. Unfortunately, one of the cities with whom we prepared the event, Sao Paulo, couldn't come in the end, but yeah, they've been pretty much part of this effort. The session is going to be split in 3 blocks. So first we're going to have opening remarks, then we're going to have a couple of presentations about 2 researchers we are finalizing at C40 around business engagement. And then thirdly, we're going to have a panel with our city and city officials. Finally, we're going to have a Q&A. So without further ado, I will introduce you to Nico Musi, Madre Brava co-founder. Madre Brava persuades company, governments, and financiers to provide good food that is healthy for people, animals, and the planet. By conducting and sharing cutting-edge research on food and climate, memorable communication to drive a narrative shift around proteins, and by campaigning and working with civil society, companies, and policymakers to deliver the protein transition, Madre Brava strives to achieve a food system that works for everyone. Nico, who is here with us today, will present the state-of-the-art of business activation for food and climate goals, and also his most crucial lesson learned on how to engage businesses in the protein transition. Please join me in warmly welcoming Nico on stage, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefania. Hi, everyone. I'm very glad to be here today with you guys. I'm going to share a few thoughts about our work and what we have seen, especially in Europe, what's working with businesses. The food we eat, or the fuel for our bodies, is at the center of 2 of the most critical crises and emergencies of humankind: the climate and the health crisis. If we look at climate, even with a complete transition away from fossil fuels, food could still, if we don't change it, could still push global heating above 1.5 degrees. Unhealthy diets are the 2nd leading cause of non-communicable diseases. These non-communicable diseases are diabetes, obesity, cancers, cardiovascular problems. In many countries across the world, and especially in rich and middle-income societies, these diseases, cancer, diabetes, are the primary cause of death in those regions, in Europe, in North America. So we need to do something about food. And cities have a key role to play. As the C40 Good Food for Healthy Cities Guide shows, the vast majority of the world's food is consumed in cities. And I quote the report. It says, even though cities are often the biggest food buyers in a region, over 85% of the food is still distributed by retailers and supermarkets. We see this as a huge opportunity for cities. Why? Well, we believe there are 3 main reasons why this opportunity is a good opportunity for cities. This is the first one. We have a flexible, balanced diet called the Planetary Health Diet. It was launched 2 weeks ago in Stockholm, and it's the global scientific consensus on what healthy and sustainable diets should be. there are more than 20 commissioners, academics from different expertise, nutrition, health, climate, from all over the world, coming together with 7 different type of modeling, coming together and for years researching to come up with this basically guidelines. The direction of travel is very clear: to lead a healthy life and avoid trespassing physical planetary boundaries, not only on climate, but also on biodiversity, water pollution, so on and so forth. We need to eat more vegetables, fruits, legumes, and nuts. And in many places, especially in rich and middle-income countries, reduce the consumption of meat, milk, cheese, animal fats, sugar, and salt. Next slide, please. The second reason why this is an opportunity for city is because this is cost-effective for society. For every dollar invested in shifting diets in line with the planetary health diet, in return we get 4 times more emissions reductions than if we invest in electric cars. That doesn't mean that we don't need electric cars, but for every dollar that you invest as a city in promoting healthier diets, you get 4 times the emissions reductions than if you invest in promoting electric cars. That's a very good return on investment. And boy, you see other food loss and waste, obviously, as cities work, is also really important. And next slide, please. The third reason is that this is good business for retailers. As our study of the German retail sector conducted by Quantis, which is a Boston consulting group firm, shows, if supermarkets rebalance protein offerings to sell more plant and fewer animal products, they can actually meet climate targets, supermarkets, and at the same time save money. If you look at the 3 key levers for supermarkets to reduce emissions and also reduce other environmental impacts, the shifting to more plants and fewer animal products is actually a cost-saving measure that could be turned into profit or could be shared around in the supply chain. This is because plant proteins, legumes, nuts, but also plant-based meat alternatives and dairy alternatives are less resource intensive and cheaper to produce. Thus, more plants means fewer cost overall that can be shared across the supply chain, resulting in lower prices for consumers and better prices for farmers. As you may know, meat and dairy is a loss leader for supermarkets. They use it to bring customers in, while fruits and vegetables are a very profitable category. So there is a lot of room to play there, and engaging with supermarkets as city officials can be very helpful. The good news is that there is a race to the top among food retailers, which has already started. And I'm going to show you a few examples in Europe of what's going on. Europe's largest food retailer, Lidl, is operating in 31 countries, has committed last year to sell more plants and fewer animal products by 2030 across the 31 countries. And their North Star is the planetary health diet. They want to achieve by 2050 food sales that are in line with that. Ahold Delhaize, a top 10 supermarket chain in Europe, working in 6 European countries, very big in the Benelux region, committed to a 50% plant, 50% animal proteins sales by 2030. The second largest Dutch retailer, Jumbo, has this year decided to stop promoting meat altogether. They still sell meat, but they don't make discounts or bargain or deals for meat, with the recognition that it's not a healthy product that they should be incentivizing. In the food service sector, which is closest to what with the public procurement of food in cities, the world's largest food service company, Compass Group, pledged to swap 40% of their meat-based meals for plant-based meals alternatives by 2030 in the UK and Ireland. And they are on track to meet those. And this is also good for consumers, as I said before. One of the key measures to incentivize consumers to shift, because you know, supermarkets can have amazing targets, but they need to sell those products, right? Lidl, what has done, and many others as well, but especially Lidl with key results, shows that if you reduce the price of plant-based alternatives and legumes to make it more attractive, customers respond. Lidl Germany lowered the price of plant-based meat and milk alternatives by 23% to sell it at the same price as the regular beef burgers and other meat products. After 6 months, they have seen an increase in sales by 30%. So more than 1-to-1 in terms of reaction to the price mechanism. So forward-looking city majors can turbocharge this race and become the leading political actor in the race to make healthy and sustainable food, or just for short, good food, the easiest choice for citizens. So this is my plea to city mayors and city officials like you. And there are 3 key actions that we see could help turbocharge this race. First, listen, convene. Convene businesses from across the supply chain in roundtable discussions to learn about the challenges and the difficulties they have to see this change happen. And find in those discussions how you guys can support them in their ambitious goal to align their food offerings, their food sales, with human and planetary health goals. Convene is the first action. The second action is ask. Ask them, persuade them. Persuade food retailers to set targets to align their food offerings with the planetary health diet. As we said, this is about more food, vegetables, legumes, whole grains that are affordable and accessible to all, and less salt, less sugar products, less fat, less meat, less cheese. And finally, lead the movement, which some of the cities, and we will hear later today, some of the cities are already doing. Lead the movement to healthier and more sustainable food in cities by aligning public procurement with the planetary health diet or similar national dietary guidelines. Some of the latest updated dietary guidelines, like in Germany and in the Nordics, are pretty much aligned with the planetary health diet. To sum up, in a world where the stakes for our health and our planet have never been higher, city mayors hold a unique opportunity and responsibility to shape a better food future. By convening the right players, persuading them for bold commitments, and making systemic change through public leadership, cities can become the engines of a global food transformation and create the future we all want for us and for our children. Good food must become the easy choice, not just for a few, but for all of us. Let's empower our cities to lead the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nico. Wonderful, wonderful, and incredibly insightful. So now, let me introduce you to our second opening guest speaker, Annelies Wiethoff, head of the Laudes Foundation Food Program. So, Laudes Foundation focuses on driving a just transition in 4 key industries with outsized impact on climate change, nature loss and inequality. Those are built environment, finance and capital markets, fashion, and food. When it comes to food, Laudes' entry point is very specific, and its vision says, advancing the transition to a healthy and affordable food industry within cities that benefit the climate, nature, and people. Annelies is specialized in regenerative agriculture, circular economy, and system-based solution. Please, Annelies, join me on stage and tell us about the insights which led Laudes to pick cities as entry points in the first place, and the opportunities and challenges for us.
Good morning, everybody. So yes, Laudes Foundation, it's a Dutch philanthropy, and we chose food as one of the 4 areas of work. Indeed, as it is a sector that has an outsized impact on climate, nature, on our social, socioeconomic fabric, and on our health. But it is also a sector that holds many of the solutions to the very issues that it is causing. So at Laudes, we want to use our philanthropic capital, which is money, but also other capital that we have, to accelerate the transition to a food system that is less carbon intensive, more circular, and to one that is just. We see enormous potential in working with the demand side of the sector, of the supply chains, and to work with the industry, and specifically supermarkets, as Nico just mentioned, but also caterers and service restaurants. We want to work with them to help shift consumer demand to that planetary health diet that Nico spoke about, and also to reduce waste. And we consider cities, municipalities as key actors in this work, given their enormous procurement power on the one hand, and their agility, innovation, and trend-setting capacity on the other hand. Cities, really unlike any other actor, understand how the different aspects of life all come together and are interconnected. It's about food security, decent work, good health, development opportunities, a clean environment, a safe living space, and as we heard yesterday, even peace. Cities' close connection to the people that are citizens, that are entrepreneurs, that are teachers, nurses, doctors, food industry workers, that close connection is really the key to unlock cities' capacity to look beyond silos and engage in integrated planning. However, as Major Manuel, and I'm blanking on his last name, or not blanking, but I just can't pronounce it. Major Manuel from Quelimane said yesterday, cities often do not realize the enormous power that they hold, what they can do in terms of integrated planning, and what they can do in terms of how instrumental they are in terms of bringing the private sector together, coordinating them and collaborating with the private sector. So to unleash that power, and we've heard it also yesterday in the opening statements, it is essential that cities have 4 things. And these 4 elements, I think philanthropy, like Laudes, but also many others, are things that philanthropy can help with. So first, the data. Scientific data are needed, and tools need to be available, so that policies can be set, so that they can be ambitious, but also so that cities can have clear indicators to track progress, their own progress and progress of the companies in the private sector within their cities. The second thing is the connection. That's why all of you are here, connecting with one another to share that experiential learning that is also needed next to the scientific data. And that is showing, that is building that, the experiential data that is building, that is also learning from mistakes and being inspired from what does work well. The third element for me, what cities really need and can do, is lift citizens' voices and agency. Citizens need to be the active co-creators of their future, but also of the food plans. And in doing so, the plans will be more inclusive, they will be more effective, and more resilient to change. And finally, and that's why this session is here, cities need to coordinate and collaborate with private sector. Large, like the supermarkets Nico mentioned, but also small. Not so much to restrict or ban or limit private players to do certain things, but really to incentivize and spark that creative power that private sector holds. So, all 4 elements are needed. The first 2, which were the data, scientific data, and the connection with one another, they are needed to help cities to measure the effects of their integrated interventions and show that the combined impacts are greater than all the individual inputs. It will help cities also to create the narrative, tell that story, and develop and get, like Nico said, persuade retailers to come on board, persuade also their citizens to play their active part. But also to convince the national governments, the regional governments here in Europe, that policies are needed to help with integrated planning at city level, but also on the level above. And maybe the level above can also do something if they see that front-runner businesses would actually be helped with mandatory rather than voluntary commitments and target setting. Then, bringing the last 2 points together that I mentioned, One is lifting citizens' voice and agency, and the other coordinating and collaborating with private sector. For me, that is really the secret sauce to successful food system transformation. Because this way, the shift to sustainable food system transformation shifts from being a moral imperative, all about climate that some people may not care so much about, to becoming an economic opportunity and a force to create a just transition, which is so essential. The Lancet Commission, of course, they researched what a planetary health diet looks like, but it's not only the components of the diet, it's also how they are sourced and how justice really sits at the center of it all. Staying with the secret sauce analogy, I think that proximity, diversity, and equity are the key spices that make this sauce so rich and deep of flavor. The transition will only be successful if it is rooted in justice and holds equity as a central principle. And businesses, as well as cities, have a key responsibility, but it's also in their own interest to ensure that accessibility and affordability of fresh, nutritious, healthy food and culturally diverse food is available for happy customers, and to ensure that fair wages and labor practices are there for motivated and inspired staff and suppliers. Cities can help strengthen that local economy by planning for urban farming, by stimulating innovative distribution networks, procuring from local small suppliers, as we've seen from the Paris commitment, an example that was given yesterday, and by fostering food innovation hubs, local food entrepreneur technologies, etc. And connecting all these proximate, diverse, small-scale businesses to the larger, more uniform players out there, that can help to build resilient local economies and resilient local supply chains to benefit both the small and the larger players. But it will not happen by itself. There is competition between all these players, and the power dynamics will get in the way, but I think that's where cities can play a role and really bring all these players together and build unlikely alliances that are needed to drive a shift to a diverse, proximate, and equitable food system. And philanthropy is happy to support with that by partnering with amazing organizations like Madre Brava, C40, London, and ICLE, and many more of those that were on the big poster yesterday, to drive the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact. And as we look ahead for the next 10 years, we know that much more needs to be done, that urgent action is needed. The question is not whether we can afford it to make this change, but the question is really, can we afford not to? So, let me invite you to cook this dish together and serve this signature sauce with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annelies. This was very insightful and very useful for us as a framing for what comes next. So, we hear now, wait, what have I done? Okay, there's one missing slide, but I will go with it. Okay, so now we are kind of in the second part of the session, where basically we want to present to you all what we have been studying at C40 in the past almost 18 months, thanks to Laudes' support, actually. So we have worked on a good food for healthy cities research, which I'm going to present. And then we also have, and we are happy to share with you today, the early findings of a new research, which is basically digging into quantifying the impact of city business engagement on food. I have these numbers here, which I know you're very, very much familiar with. The one that you might be less familiar with, and which Nico also mentioned before, is the last one. So the 80% of the food that is consumed in cities is basically channeled by the private sector. This means that we can do a lot as cities with our strengths, with our money, with our procurement and our programs, but that we also need to engage the private sector to make a real transformation. And this is not just something that is C40's thinking about when it comes to the food sector. We have quite a track record on working with businesses in other sectors, like energy, like buildings, and so on. And what we have observed, wow, how many phones, all of a sudden. And what we have observed in general terms is that whenever cities are working with leading industry partners to really like bring everybody together, big and small, working toward the same kind of climate objective, the increase, the emission reduction will increase by 77%. And the way this happens, you know, you have a lot of kind of opportunities or mechanisms listed here, can vary and really vary from place to place. So why we decided to go into this research? We have a Good Food Cities Accelerator, which is a city commitment, which was created in 2019 based on the Eat Lancet Planetary Health Diet. And our second goal, our second target for that commitment was really trying to shift general consumption towards the diet, which means going beyond public procurement and really trying to change people's dietary habits. And we discussed and our cities piloted a lot of different things here and there, but in the end, what we realized, there was no other way to kind of go for it than working with the private sector. So when we realized that was, you know, basically the pathway ahead of us, we decided to take kind of a little bit of a scientific approach. Let's see what's going on first in our cities. Let's see what is the kind of public-private engagement on food and how things are done with which vision, which objectives and so on. And so we interviewed a bunch of cities. We interviewed a lot of business initiatives, as well as some businesses. And we realized that among C40 cities, there were already a lot of different approaches when it came to engaging the private sector, which we then called models. And you can see listed them here, but I will go through them, just to present a bit what is already there. This is the QR code, if you want to download the guide. It's available in different languages, and it's on C40 Knowledge Hub. I'll just leave you. Okay, I guess you go. So the first one is easy. You know, for all the city in the room, you know what we're talking about, is business support programs. It might be your department, it might be the economic development department, you're all doing something like that. I'm not sure you're doing something like that on food businesses. In this case, obviously, we're talking usually small businesses, corner stores, little restaurants, little retailers. You know how they work. We will have Lauren from New York presenting one program that is kind of that works in this vein. What we know about business support programs is obviously that they require prolonged investment. But what we've seen happening is the city really coming to these businesses and helping them shifting what is supplied to people. So basically moving from something very unsustainable and unhealthy to something that is healthy and sustainable for their customers. It's not rare to see these business support programs happening and being implemented in underserved areas, in specific neighbors where, you know, you might call it food swamps or food deserts, or, you know, places where it's not very easy to have access to healthy and sustainable food. We also seen in a bunch of our cities a different kind of model of approaching private businesses. We call this model the enabling innovation. We're basically talking innovation labs. In this case, really like the cities convening specific businesses around some topics and really incentivizing and support them innovating something in their operation. Obviously, the ambition needs to be a shared ambition. You might have seen a bunch of these innovative labs happening around food waste, I have to say that's the usual one in a bunch of different cities. Let's sit together, find ways to reduce what ends up in the solid waste components in a city. But this could also be kind of expanded into diets, like as a second big chapter. Yes, as you can see here, obviously, like there are a lot of universities and different kind of partners that can come in and support on this. Networking, this I think it's something that Annelies mentioned in her remarks before. Also something that we've seen in a bunch of different cities, where you guys have basically convened different segments of the supply chain to kind of strengthen those ties. It's not become friends, or also maybe become friends, but there's obviously an economic opportunity there. So is the city really encouraging this connection between the production, the logistic, the consumer-facing businesses to create new market channels for local production, to help push some specific products, new products, local products, sustainable products. So this is something that, you know, is happening a lot around our cities with different names, obviously. We're just labeling things to make it clear for the sake of our readers, but you know what I'm talking about. And also convening, this is another model, and I would say this is the bravest, probably. Well, I'm not sure if it's the bravest, but it's very brave. So in this case, obviously, there's something, you know, a little bit of that secret ingredient to make the sauce here, and that's a bit of that political capital that the city might have, the mayor or deputy mayor might have, and it's trying to get the big guys, the big companies, the large ones at the table, start discuss which are your goals when it comes to health and climate. Can we try to build, you know, an action agenda that is shared? Can we try to move together toward those goals, knowing that my city has got this climate action plan, has got this food strategy, our goals are X, Y, Z. And obviously, this is very, very complex because, you know, these guys, big retailers, big food services, some people in these big companies may be used to hold dialogues with public authorities, but some may not. So sometimes we really face companies that, you know, never had this kind of open, plain discussion with anybody from, you know, from the public sector. So that might be tricky. Call to action. This is our fifth model, and again, we're going to hear from New York. This is, again, building on the city's political capital, but leadership, I would say, mostly. And it is, as Lauren is going to tell us in a short while, if, let's take, like if a mayor and a city is doing something pioneering, is pioneering in some sector, then they will have kind of the strength to lead by example and call out all players in the city to do the same, even actually exceeding what the city has done. Like, I've reduced emission from, you know, my school meals by 15%. Now you food services in the room need to follow the same track, maybe get to 10. Maybe there will be somebody that goes to 20. But that is using that leadership, kind of leading by example, basically. Finally, the place-based engagement. So this, we kind of realized while interviewing all our cities that in some contexts, the mayor was really kind of almost using a mixed model, like picking the best of the previous model that I explained to you. Maybe starting with the small ones, with financial support, business support program, and then using that critical mass to push the big ones in the same neighborhood to kind of align and do something about it. So I love to mention the Tokyo's Vegetable Life Project, or also called the Adachi Project, because in that case, something big really happened in the city. So the mayor, the governor of Tokyo realized that life expectancy was basically different in that specific ward, in that borough, in that arrondissement. It was like, I think, 3 years less than the average Tokyo life expectancy. And so they studied it. They studied what is going on in this neighborhood, and they realized it was diet. So they went full on, like to change what was offered to people. And they start with business support program. And then, with movement building, like education and schools, and everybody was involved. And at that point, all the big guys, all the big retailers and the big food services understood that they also need to do their part. So this whole thing went on for a few years, and the Tokyo University realized that basically almost around 8-9 years after the kickoff of this kind of orchestrated effort, the life expectancy finally changed and was raised up to the average of the Tokyo metropolitan area. So it was impactful, it was incredible. So, and that is the kind of things we would love to see. Probably your cities might also be more intrigued about, because it's a mixed kind of source of different things. I think, yes, I'm obviously of my time, and this one is, what do I need to point? Okay, this is just thank you. Okay, so that's all on the guide. Thank you. And now I will ask Shambhavi and Rashi to join me on stage and walk us through the other research, the early findings actually of this research. But first, and before doing it, please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, I am Rashi and this is my colleague Shambhavi. We both are co-founders of Swarascape, but here we are collaborating with C40 cities on this very interesting, very amazing project. Thank you, Steph. Thank you, C40, for engaging us, and also thanks to Laudes. So we basically, before we begin our presentation, after hearing Nico and Annelies, we are here to tie everything and their great recommendations with data. And before we begin, let's imagine a scenario where what if we start changing the default food supply to something that could actually cut emissions and improve health? That sounds interesting. And this is what our work in progress project will, that we're going to deep dive in and show. So for us, let's think of it as a taste test for policy. And we will show you some data that will actually, one, we can eat. And by the end of this presentation, we're pretty sure everyone is going to love broccoli. So in the next few minutes, we will show how we've turned menus into matrices. More importantly, we're going to go through background, everything that you've already discussed, the methodology, and why we chose New York as our case study, and then finally key findings and the next steps. So this background summary, it's basically everything that you've already, Nico has already also mentioned. But let's just gauge the problem that we have in hand today. Food systems drive 30% of global GHGs. Food loss and wastage is about 8 to 10%. As Nico rightly pointed out, our diet is a big health lever. It has big links to obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, so much so that 6.9 million deaths in 2019 were due to CVD. But we can prevent all of that, and which is approximately 27% of global deaths, by just shifting global dietary patterns. And this is where cities and businesses can align. Most food consumed in the cities, most of the food is consumed in cities. It's 70 to 80%. It flows through consumer-facing businesses. And so here, cities and businesses together are perfect partners for change. Now, next, please, if you can just. So this very nice looking global map shows the 6 cities that we are focusing on for this study. It is a good mix of very diverse cultures and population size and demographics. And this cycle of sorts shows the methodology that we undertook. It was iterative design where we've tried to mix up methods where we're looking at scenarios, what-if scenarios that my colleague Shambi will discuss in details. We tried to validate our findings, and then we maintained a feedback loop. The feedback loop was, of course, speaking to city officials, desk research, etc. The baseline, of course, was 2025. On the supply side, we looked at large, small, and medium enterprises, retailers, and restaurants. For this, we just saw the market size, the market type, and we tried to collect data. We tried to extrapolate it to 2025 if in cases we could not find the data for. We looked at the consumption patterns when it comes to animal-based and plant-based diets. And of course, we looked at the macro analysis, which was population growth, income distribution, etc. Finally, when we're talking about qualitative and benchmarking policy, this was more of the qualitative side of our study. It was important for us to understand each city's behavioral, socioeconomic, and structural drivers. And it was, we gauged a lot of information through semi-structured interviews with key officials, chefs, and retailers. And we tried to analyze and integrate our findings with, like I said, with desk research and the data that we actually we will present shortly with these qualitative interviews. Importantly, we looked at, just if you could just go back. Importantly, we tried to benchmark with what can be with policy, with actual policy that has already been enabled in these cities by the city officials. Next slide, please. So now the question comes to why New York City. Of course, we all love New York for multiple reasons, but it was important because of the enormous market size that it presents. It was the city officials there. There's already a lot of political clout that we've all spoken about. The city officials are driving this through their policies already, but we also had the market size, the supply share, the availability of vegan restaurants, and there were multiple reasons, but I will give it to Shami to explain.
Thanks, Rashi. So coming to the point how we modeled food system change. We started with a simple question on how much could New York City cut food-related emissions and improve health if both businesses and consumers shift from animal-based protein to plant-based protein. And to explore that, we built a diffusion model, which is a common tool used to study how new ideas diffuse and new products spread. We divided the consumer segment into 3 parts: the early adopters, which are mostly the environmentally and health-conscious people; the mainstream adopters, who are the ones who would follow the trend once it's normal; and then the resistant adopters, who would move slowly, if at all. And all these different groups had different effective uptake rate that we further averaged for each of these cities, and we will be only showing the stats for the New York City today. In other words, this model helps us to see how collective change unfolds not overnight, but through a steady ripple effect. Now coming to the point where we built 18 scenarios by combining 3 different levels of business engagement with different degree of menu and supply shifts that we were trying to gauge. At the top end, the full engagement means that the 90% of the large enterprises and the small, medium enterprises join city business alliances, paired with 50% menu shift away from animal protein. Similarly, the medium means half businesses participate with 30% shift, and low reflects small pilots or voluntary actions, only around 20% participation with 10% menu and supply shift. Each combination, like full or medium-low, show how ambitious levels translate into outcomes. For example, if half of the animal protein in the market are replaced by the plant-based options, citywide consumption rises gradually from about 3% to 30% by 2030 from our model as the three consumers groups adopt to their own pace. The diffusion curves are on the right illustrates that pattern that early adopters peak first, the mainstream follows, and the resistant consumers move slowly but steadily upward. We also considered price parity in this consideration, whereby plant-based alternatives would be cheaper and will be available at the same rate as that of the animal-based proteins. So here is the preliminary findings in terms of the GHG emission component. And here is what has happened when those scenarios would play out. So in the case of full scenarios, which means the high engagement and strong menu shifts, we are projecting that there would be we will be achieving large drop of roughly 45% lowered emissions by 2030, considering 2025 as the baseline. In case of medium case, we would be delivering moderate gains, around 15%, while low scenario is barely move the needle, which is 4%. You can see that the gap between these lines are widening over time. That's the compounding effect of early systemic changes, which when big players and small businesses move together, change accelerates exponentially. And these figures focus on protein categories so that the impact would be much greater if we include dairy and other substitutes. The key takeaway is simple. The ambitious collaboration pays off, both in climate terms and in the health co-benefits that follow. So lastly, what are the implications in the next steps? Firstly, of course, the full participation is leading to a reduction of GHG emissions by 40% by 2030. The second, the key levers, which are both behavioral and technical, which includes participation rate, the menu design, the consumer defaults, the marketing, and the public awareness. We also emphasize on enabling conditions, supporting SMEs with finances, recognition, embedding health metrics in climate dashboards, investing in the shared data system so progress can be tracked transparently. And finally, narrative framing matters, talking about taste, talking about culture, equity, rather than sacrifice and restriction. Next, we will extend this modeling to 6 cities, which we have already discussed. We will also refine our health benefit quantification, and we will be presenting that soon to you, so stay tuned. And we will be launching an interactive Excel tool so that the partners can test their own policy and the business engagement scenarios. Our goal is to share replicable levers from New York and other cities, like procurement standards, partnerships that can inspire other action worldwide. So we would like to end with this. This is one of the conversations that we had with one of the New York City mayor's officials, and they said that demand is often manufactured. That's why nudges and defaults matter. And our findings show exactly the same, that when it comes to this work, city business alliances, we need to make good choices, normal and not exceptional. And once we do that with food, we have come more than halfway. And with this, we thank you for your attention and being so patiently listening to these findings. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to us. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. So I think this is the end of the second block of our session. And now for the third block, I will ask our city officials, Lauren Drumgold from New York City, Edwin Marty from Austin, and Katie Robbery from London to join me at the table. I'm also going to sit down. Okay, are your mic working? Yes. Right, let's start from Lauren in the middle. So Lauren is New York City policy advisor at the Mayor's Office of Food Policy. And you probably all know here what is going on in New York. actually, what is going on in New York? so you know, like there's been great work happening around procurement. And at C40, we're also super excited about this new food and climate plan that is almost ready to be launched. At this point, and for this session, we will ask you, actually, Lauren, to tell us about what's going on with the business engagement. And you have 5 minutes. Please, Lauren, the floor is yours. You have to push that one. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to come here. This is my first Milan Urban Food Policy Pact conference, and it's just been really great to hear from other cities about what's been working well and challenges. And I've also been learning a lot from others, things that I'll be taking back to the team and thinking about how we might be able to incorporate that into the work streams we're currently doing. Our city's goal is really to ensure that New Yorkers have access to affordable, healthy, and culturally relevant foods. And that includes the meals that New Yorkers consume, as well as influencing residents' built environment. So on meals, like the Stefania mentioned, we have a city food procurement initiative that we operate with, supporting with our city agencies that are serving food to the public. We encourage that food procurement to include nutritionally dense and environmentally sustainable foods. And as a city, we have the goal to reduce our carbon emissions from city food purchases by 33% by 2030. And yet we know that food consumption is our third, in a city, the third largest source of our overall carbon emissions, and city food procurement is just one slice of that pie. So with that in mind, we established our plant-powered carbon challenge to engage the private sector and encourage them to reduce their food carbon footprint by at least 25% by 2030. So with that program or initiative, we had 20 signatories sign on. That includes groups from universities, healthcare, hospitality, and even sports venues to take leadership in understanding where their food-related carbon emissions fall within their operations and really drive, based on their operations, their own approaches to creating low-carbon plates. That includes things like building choice-centered menus that nudge New Yorkers towards more sustainable options, as well as celebrating the plant-based meals and recipe creation. Through the city social capital, which I think our program falls into the call to action section of the guide. Through our social capital, we've been able to manage support for the initiative through our external partners, including Greener by Default, which supports signatories with research-backed strategies to offer healthier and more sustainable meals within our signatories' operations. So that's for the Plant Power Carbon Challenge. And then moving on to the built environment. Of course, New York City is densely populated. We have over 8 million people in the city, which makes the built environment an important lever for the city to implement meaningful program and policy intervention. And so through that, a few years back, the New York City Health Department heard from community groups and food advocates that there's a need to support healthful offerings in neighborhoods across the city that have a high concentration of corner stores. For some context, corner stores are smaller format stores, typically independently owned and operated. They often have limited capacity for carrying staple grocery items, so they have limited shelving space, storage, limited refrigeration. So they don't carry the same items that a traditional supermarket might carry. So these stores often include a lot of shelf-stable foods and snacks, things that have limited spoilage concerns for the owner's sake, but then they are also, because they're shelf-stable, often tend to be of lower nutritional density and are also highly processed usually. So the health department, out of those concerns, back in 2012, developed the Shop Healthy program, and, oh, perfect. And so that program, through the health department, it's a city-funded program which works with corner store owners to, it's a voluntary program that owners can opt into, but they work with them to expand their product offerings to fresh produce and to also counter the unhealthy food and beverage advertisements that are often seen in these corner stores. The program operates pretty closely across the city. You know, they do an assessment of which communities, which zip codes have a particular particular concern for the density of corner stores and limited access to fresh foods. And they work closely in one of our boroughs in the Bronx, in the southern region of that, where for every supermarket in that area, there tends to be, on average, about 8 corner stores. So just emphasizing that there's an abundance of that shelf-stable food products compared to fresh and nutritious foods in those communities. So the program, they actually hire, the health department hires within the local community to support corner store owners in building their rapport with them, as well as providing technical assistance on healthy item product placement to influence purchases, like making produce visible at the front counter or shelving water at eye level, as well as placement of promotional materials that the health department creates to encourage customers in making healthier choices. And yeah, the next slide has some of those examples. So things like encouraging people, you know, if you're thirsty, grab a water. And then also things related to, say, purchasing whole grain. Also, we have an option of like sharing like a special like lunch combo. So like encouraging the prepared foods that folks purchase, encouraging that to be the healthier option. And then the health department, lastly, also engages with the community on activities to create awareness about unhealthy food and beverage advertisements.
I think I should use this one. Okay, whatever. Tricking me. Production is tricking me. Okay. Better? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. No. Really? Sorry. Now? Okay. Can I? Right. Perfect. Thank you, Lauren. And now let's go to Katie from Re London. Katie Robbery is the head of partnership and external affairs at Re London. And for the one of you who don't know what Re London is, Re London is a partnership of the Mayor of London and the London Borough to improve waste and resource management and transform the city into a leading low-carbon circular economy. So, Katie, London is featured in our Good Food for Healthy Cities guide for having convened large and small businesses in 2023 to discuss vision and innovative actions to pilot in your city. Re London have been busy since then, investigating the role of cities in moving from convening, one of that model that we showed before, to action. Tell us more about what you're thinking now, and you have 5 minutes as well.
Thank you. Everyone hear me okay? Hi. So yeah, as Stefania mentioned, Re London are a partnership of the Mayor and the 33 boroughs in London. So London's extremely complicated city structure. And interestingly, the kind of journey that we've been on with this convening work, which was amusing to hear Stefania refer to it as the brave option. But yeah, too late now. We can reflect that we were brave. It's really interesting seeing all the 6, yeah, good, remembered right, the 6 models. We've kind of been on a journey since then through a few of those 6 models from the convening moment. Because Re London also does business support in London, so we have a network of whatever the London equivalent of corner stores is. We call them everyday businesses, supporting them to adopt circular business practices, and we also run innovation hubs for circular startups, including focused on food. And we have also, I guess, partly starting with the convening we did in 2023, but more generally, been quite intensively piloting and exploring a place-based approach to a lot of the things we do, which is part of the story here. So in 2023, we convened, we worked in partnership with the GLA, and the Deputy Mayor for Environment convened a group of businesses to come together and discuss commitments around reducing food-related consumption-based emissions. So encompassing some food waste ideas and also some ideas on diet. And really what we were testing there was it possible to bring enough political capital, as you called it in the report earlier, to bear on some of those businesses? And the answer pretty immediately was yes. London has an extremely politically prominent, nationally renowned mayoralty, and especially in 2023, a reasonably unique mayoral office in the UK in terms of the London Mayor's global political prominence. That's slightly shifting now because there's a very politically prominent mayor in Manchester now, and other places. So we were really pleased with ourselves immediately. We managed to convene a large group of household name retailers, national and global chains, right through the food supply chain, from retail, processing, some of the restaurant chains, and also interestingly a couple of large but quite London-focused businesses. For example, a couple of the Premiership football teams took part. So that was really interesting. They engaged in meaningful discussion and commitment, and that was great. So what did we do next? Well, we moved on, supported by the Laudes Foundation, moved on pretty quickly to set out to investigate the ways to activate those commitments, so to help to move those businesses to action. And that's really where our journey of starting assumption versus where we ended up began. It's quite a big shift. When we started, fresh from our successful convening moment with the big players, the large food businesses through the supply chain, we thought that an obvious route to scale was going to be to dig in with them and explore how the city could support them to action some of the commitments they'd outlined. And actually we discovered something slightly different. So we engaged, supported by the Laudes Foundation, we engaged in a study, quite a detailed study, and a crucial thing we did was that we broadened the reach of that study beyond the businesses who'd participated in the original convening to a much wider group. So we spoke through interviews, focus groups, quite a detailed process to a wider group, including small and medium businesses across London. And we uncovered a few things, which I realised is ending up at the mixed source. We're really stretching the source metaphor in this session, but that's where this is heading. Spoiler alert. Sorry, Annalise. We discovered a couple of key structural barriers which slow action for the large players, and not all of those are solvable at the city level. But we also uncovered something else, that those structural barriers largely don't apply in the same way to medium and small businesses. And I guess when I say medium and small, I'm not just talking about the corner stores. In London, there is a large section of the market around, for example, distributors, wholesalers, who are quite sizable, medium-sized London-wide businesses and have a large section of the market in their own right. So those businesses don't face some of the same barriers. At the same time, we'd been piloting a couple of place-based pilots around the city, and we began to think about the power that everyday businesses, London-based small and medium businesses, have to shift choice architecture for consumers at the neighbourhood level. And we really clearly came to the conclusion that although supply chains are national and global, really the shift needs to happen at that hyper-local level. It's crucial for communicating with customers, for national and global businesses and for local businesses in the same way. And we came to an emerging theory of change, which I'll talk about later on, which we're still developing and looking for input from partners on at this session, which is that there might be a way to use the more immediate ability to act for those medium and small businesses to catalyse change for the larger ones.
That's it. Thank you, Katie. Wonderful. Very curious now to know the theory of change, the new one. And so let's move to Edwin Marty. He's a food policy manager Office of Climate Action and Resilience at the City of Austin. So Austin has been doing great work around a lot of different areas. Food procurement, obviously, with the Good Food Purchasing Program, but also increasing availability of food retailers in targeted zip codes, and many other actions that really build a systemic relation between the CDO and the private sector. Now, Edwin, tell us how you make it.
Thanks so much. Appreciate being included on this panel. I think, again, I'm Edwin Marty, Food Policy Manager with the City of Austin in Texas, deep in the United States, deep in the middle of the United States. Maybe a bit of a counterpoint to my friends here from London and New York in terms of politics, and worth giving a tiny bit of context if you're not familiar with Texas. Deeply conservative state. The University of Texas's logo is a cow, and we believe that barbecue is the primary food that should be consumed at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So in the context of this conversation, my job, along with my colleagues' job, is to think about, what can we do in that context that we know from reports like Eat Lancet that we need to adjust our consumption of red meat by something like 800% in North America. And yet in Texas, the political will and sort of the cultural will to address that is very different than, say, in London or New York. So what can we do? So the good news for us is in the city of Austin, we have a fairly progressive and bold city council and mayor. In 10 years ago, we created a target to be net zero by 2040. We were one of the first cities in the country, and certainly in Texas, to set aspirational goals around carbon and greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So our first step along that journey was to create a climate plan, which we created, and it was very inward focused, primarily municipal operations. The city of Austin owns its own power utility, which created a lot of interesting opportunities. We control where our energy comes from, essentially. And so we focused on our greenhouse gas reduction emissions in our power utility, in our solid waste department, in municipal operations, in our fleet, et cetera. And then City Council had given us a mandate to create a new climate plan every 5 years to try to help adjust and adapt the path. So the next climate plan included a much broader landscape, including citywide emissions, community-based emissions. And that's where my job sort of got involved with the climate planning process. Everybody kind of came in my office and was like, okay, so we've done the easy stuff. Relatively, like, what do we do now? And so fortunately, being able to look to colleagues in places like London and New York, we started working on our own comprehensive food system plan. So looking at the 20% of greenhouse gas emissions that our food system represents in the city of Austin, thinking about the things that we can control. I mean, interesting to see in this great report that's just come out how little control local government does have directly over greenhouse gas emissions. And in particular, comparatively to London or New York, the city of Austin purchases about $2 million of food directly each year. Last time I heard, I think New York was like at 500 million or something like that. Don't quote me, but it was a lot more, let's just say. So in the city of Austin, we don't have direct control over our school system. Our school systems are a separate bureaucratic organization. Our jails are essentially mostly separate, hospitals separate, et cetera. So trying to understand what do we have direct control over, what can we influence, I mean, basically the report that's been laid out sort of walks through all of the challenges that kept me up at night and woke me up in the morning, like what can we do? So we launched this food planning process. The first step was to try to build a mandate, and critically important, we needed the people of the city of Austin to say, this is important, this is where we are, this is where we want to go, and this is how we should get there. And the reason that that mandate was so important is people like me embedded within local government can say, I've read the research, we need to go from here to here, and that doesn't carry much weight. And especially when we think about recruiting the private sector. We have an incredible community of private food sector businesses in Austin. You might have heard of a company called Whole Foods. It's a grocery store chain founded, located, headquartered in Austin. And another grocery store chain called H-E-B, the most popular grocery store chain in the entire country, but they're only in Texas. Beloved grocery store chain, and they do fantastic stuff. But to get them on board in a way that we can start looking at that glide path to move from massive greenhouse gas emissions footprint to a zero footprint was going to be challenging. The data is petrifying and terrifying. I've used this slide over and over and over again to try to create a sense of urgency that our food system is directly responsible for the greenhouse gas emissions that we're dealing with. Yet we have very little food produced locally. Less than 0.1% less than 0.06% of our food is produced locally. So even if we wanted to relocalize our food system, we would be starting on a very difficult trajectory. We're expanding quickly. We've been one of the fastest growing cities in the country for many, many, many years. So we're turning all of our farmland into suburban land and reducing the future capacity to sequester carbon on green spaces. We have very high levels of food insecurity. We throw away a massive amount of our food. So basically all of these stats are just to point to the fact that we are in a somewhat of a crisis if we're going to try to actually achieve our greenhouse gas emissions goals. So on top of that, we used a lot of dramatic natural disasters to try to create leverage in our elected officials and in the private sector. We had a number of natural disasters statewide recently. For the first time in modern history, Texas was hit by a statewide freeze a couple of years ago. Grocery stores were shut down for the first time in modern history. Grocery stores were closed for multiple days. I got a call from our mayor on the second or third day of the freeze and asked, what are we going to do if the grocery stores don't open? I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. We have never had this happen before. Sort of joking. But that, along with this really difficult sort of landscape of creating a partnership, gave us a lot more power to say we needed a comprehensive food system plan. So we got city council and county commissioner direction and funding to create a comprehensive food system plan a couple of years ago. So we've launched that food planning process. We spent a couple of years out in the community talking to thousands of people across the community, working with stakeholders, trying to get what are the things that the people in the city of Austin care most about, what are the things that they would like to see the city do, what are the things that they want to do, what are the things that they want to see their businesses that they support do. So we created this very comprehensive food system plan with 9 goals and 61 strategies. One of the goals was around plant-based foods and what we call climate smart diets. So I want to just focus for just a minute on that specific section, recognizing that we don't purchase very much food as a municipal organization. There's a massive cultural push, or just sort of almost a fetishing of barbecue, and how to think about what are the intervention opportunities. So fortunately, again, leaning on that idea of a mandate, we got some very clear and specific things that the people in our community want to see happen in the next 5 years, focusing on choice, focusing on what we talk about extensively in Texas and obsessively in the United States, freedom. how do we define freedom is a little bit of a complicated thing right now in the United States. But what we wanted to focus on through the lens of our food plan, through the lens of climate in Austin, Texas, was when you go to a restaurant, you should have the freedom to purchase food that's plant-based. Sort of switching a narrative. Freedom is traditionally thought of in America and in Texas as you get to do whatever you want, wherever you want, and nobody can tell you what to do. And we lean into that real hard. But we can sort of take that and invert that narrative and say, if you walk into a restaurant and you're not free to purchase plant-based food, somebody is oppressing you. We're trying that. And so it's a bit of a different narrative, but quite literally we've now partnered with some of our friends in the private sector to do a plant-based challenge at restaurants. And so really leaning into this idea that you should be able to go to a restaurant and be able to have options. I am married to a vegan in Austin, Texas, and so I get to experience these challenges quite literally 3 times a day, every day. Fortunately, I married a woman who's also an amazing cook, and so we eat a lot of food at home, but we do love to go out. We have kids who are also on the vegan spectrum. That's a new thing. But we go to restaurants a lot. I will maybe just touch on briefly, if I can, a quick experience I had last night here in this beautiful city of Milan. We went out to a restaurant down the street from our hotel, which was plant-based. My wife and I were walking and saw this restaurant a few days ago. We were so excited, 100% plant-based, everything. So we went back last night and sat down. We were so excited. And the owner of the restaurant walks in and immediately was just like, I think noticing we were American, was like, this is only plant-based food, vegan. And we're like, yes, we got that, 100%. That's why we're here. And so we had a wonderful dinner. It was really some of my favorite food I've had anywhere. It was just absolutely delightful, really wonderful experience. As we were getting up to leave, another couple walked in, and the restaurant owner does the same thing, walks up and says, vegan, plant-based only. And the couple looks at each other and literally turns around and walks out. And so I walked up to the owner and asked him a little bit, how's it going? Where are you? And he unfortunately said, we're probably going to close soon. And I'm not using the name of the restaurant because I don't want to, who knows if he was just telling me that to make me feel sorry for him. But I got a sense that it was a pretty sincere challenge. There is a framing conversation that I think he is experiencing that most other businesses, very similar to Austin. We have a lot of food truck plant-based restaurants. You can go to a sort of a temporary pop-up restaurant. Very, very few 100% plant-based restaurants. So what we've been working on, to summarize, is create choice, use incentives to create choice, use challenges to create choices. We all should have the choice to eat the kind of food that we want that reflects our values. And we think that the municipal operations lane in at least Austin, Texas, is to push that idea of choice and to incentivize those choices. Thank you.
Thank you, Edwin. Okay, so we should have a short, super short video right now from Rotterdam. And then I'll ask you one question. We're kind of out of time, but I think we can steal 15 minutes more. Let's go with the video first. Is this going? Not going? Not going. Oh, there is our guy. We don't have audio. No audio. Okay, maybe I can start with the questions before, and then we see the video from Rotterdam. No signs from there, but I guess this is how, yeah. Okay. Let's go with the questions. Okay, so your three and more actually, interesting case studies. I want to know from each of you which has been the biggest challenge you faced while kind of implementing those programs, and the biggest opportunities you can tell people and cities in the room who may want to replicate some of these great projects. Let's start from Lauren. Let's take the same order. Let's start with Lauren and then Katie and then Edwin.
Sure.
From there, so we can launch it again and try with this mic. But there's a technical problem, so it's impossible to have it. Okay. Do you want to do that now or after?
No, maybe we can do it after.
Okay, you tell me when and we'll try.
You can start. Great. Go,
Yeah,
Barbara.
so first the main challenge, so with the Shop Healthy program, there has been cases of some store owner pushback in seeing the potential cost benefits of selling healthier food items. Like mentioned, these stores have shelf-stable foods, and because they're shelf-stable, it allows them to not have to worry about the spoilage of food, and extends the life of the food items that they carry, and goes into their bottom line sales. So the perception of the potential sales is a key driver of store owner hesitancies. And to address this, the Shop Healthy program, they educate the store owners about the upsell of cut fruit, smoothies, things that are kind of like easy to grab and go foods that are more helpful, and share that to demonstrate that making the fresh items readily available and consumable supports their sales, as well as the placement of those products. So again, placing grab and go fruit at the front of the counter, or even the price signage. The health department encourages store owners, demonstrates to them, there's studies showing that having the marker of how much an item costs can support in sales, because sometimes the price isn't labeled on products. People might walk away they might assume a certain price for it. So they provide that technical assistance again to share with them the benefits of carrying these items. And as far as opportunities, one opportunity or transformation of our Plant Power Carbon Challenge that we're really excited to be working towards to be officially launched in the coming months. Our office, alongside with the New York City Health Department, are developing a new initiative called the Center for Health, Environment, and Food Service. Also, we're going to call it CHEFS for short, which will serve as a resource hub for food service best practices from both city agencies as well as our external partners. And so as a part of that CHEFS initiative, we're going to be shifting the Plant Power Carbon Challenge into a learning community for signatories to share their experiences, their questions, their knowledge with each other, as well as with city agencies and other external groups, as well as the opportunity for a sharing of resources from around the globe, really creating a peer exchange environment. So it's a really exciting opportunity for our city and our office to expand our focus beyond just the climate benefits, but also how it relates to overall health goals. So really doubling down on those opportunities where both of those priorities are intersecting. I'll shout out my colleague Aura Kemp, who's going to be supporting that initiative more closely, so feel free to reach out to her if you want to learn more about what we're going to be up to there.
Thank you, Lauren. Katie.
Yeah, so challenges. As I mentioned before, the challenges really came when we got into the detail of supporting the businesses that we convened into action. And the two key structural barriers that the larger businesses face were that they need policy incentives to act, unsurprising, and secondly, that they need consumers to move slightly ahead of them. So there was anxiety about pushing consumers into choices that, where they might feel like they're moving first. Interestingly, though, we found that neither of these applied in the same way to medium and small businesses in the study. We also found in the wider context that upcycled innovation in upcycled food products in London is not reaching the supply chain of larger food supply chains effectively. And also we found that there's a lack of data on food waste prevention measures, which blocks businesses from taking them up. And so the next opportunity, really, we'd like to develop a sort of emerging theory of change to explore whether we can use the immediate opportunity for action with medium and small businesses to catalyse a space for change, I guess, for larger businesses. So we think that small and medium businesses with really good support can engage consumers at the neighbourhood level. We think that it's easier to get innovation into their supply chains and thus get it into the market. And we think it really speaks to the place-based narrative because it anchors that change in local economies in London. That's what we're working on. Come and have a chat if you're interested. We're looking for partner input.
Thank you, Katie. And I think next step for us is connect you with Tokyo, I suppose. Yeah, right? Okay. Edwin, yo.
Thank you. I touched on a lot of challenges before, so I'll be brief, but we are very interested in exploring alternatives to animal protein, and at the same time, there is an emerging organization called the Texas Native Buffalo Project that I'll just touch on very quickly. We've been able to partner with them and help secure some additional land for their operation right outside of Austin. Buffalo has a massively different greenhouse gas emissions footprint than cows and cattle. The Native Texas Buffalo Project is very interested in partnering with schools and getting buffalo into schools, ground buffalo. Really exciting and interesting opportunity from an ecological perspective. It's fascinating to look at the history of Texas through the lens of buffalo's impact versus a cow's impact. Just dramatically different in terms of soil, water, and even air quality. Needless to say, there's some interesting and powerful cultural stories that can be brought into that as well. So that's one interesting opportunity to think about. Sort of there's an unchangeable component that we have to face that most likely people in our community are just simply going to eat animal proteins. But can we lean into that idea of creating more choice, more variation, and look at reverting back in some ways our food system towards animals like buffalo who were native or adapted to live much gentler on the land. So exciting stuff. It's not something that gets talked about, I think, enough in these conversations, but that's what we'll be trying to lean into in the near future. Thanks.
Thank you. And now, Chris, I'm not sure whether we will be able, yeah? Can we try and see the video now from Rotterdam? Stealing 3 more minutes of your time. Thank you for being with us.
Rotterdam is building a future-proof food system. At the heart is at Nieuwe Nassen, an initiative of Blue City, the city's hub for circular entrepreneurship, where action and collaboration come first. Today, over 100 chefs, entrepreneurs, farmers and institutions are part of the movement. Together with ambassadors Perry de Man and Pepijn Smenk, we put the food transition on the map. Our goal is simple: make Rotterdam's hospitality businesses future-proof, from restaurants and cafes to hospital cafeterias, zoos and sports stadiums. That means healthier meals, less waste, more plant proteins, and locally sourced ingredients from sustainable farmers and entrepreneurs. We help hospitality professionals with practical advice and create space to learn through meetups, media, and challenges. From Feyenoord Stadium to the Hilton Hotel and the Euromast, iconic places joined the Zero Waste Challenge. They mapped where food was lost, from the kitchen to the plate, and learned how to cut it. The results? 2,300 kilos of food rescued, 8,500 kilos of CO2 prevented, 15 million liters of water saved, and 16,500 euros worth of food back on the plate. We closed with a waste-free dinner at Feyenoord. 140 guests, citizens, entrepreneurs and city officials sat down together to taste how good rescued food can be. Rotterdam Zoo joined the Protein Transition Challenge, in which participants worked on more plant-based proteins on their menu. The zoo linked food with wildlife conservation. With our support, new menus were designed and tested. The diets of elephants, parrots and fish inspired kids' meals, and the children's jury crowned their favorite, the Elephantastic Burger. The launch was celebrated with the deputy mayors and a special zoo dinner for 80 guests who enjoyed a local, sustainable, waste-free menu. Today, the Elephantastic Burger is on the zoo's menu, so thousands of children can discover how eating well supports themselves, the planet, and the animals they love. Food connects us, around the table, in kitchens and across City Hall. With at Nieuwe Nassen, Rotterdam is building a future-proof food system, bite by bite.
Yeah, I love the Elephantastic Burger. I really wanted you to see that. Okay, so thank you for being here. Thanks to our speakers. Thanks to Annelise and Nico. Thanks to Shami and Rashi. And it was great to have this time with you all and discuss things. Thank you very much.